Remember when Trump said this?
No, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now, we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
Now, let's fast forward a couple of years. Here's what they're doing in New York City.
The city council is advancing a bid to remove statues of controversial historical figures.
Yeah, this would include figures such as George Washington, who knew he was controversial, Thomas Jefferson, Peter Stuyvesant, and Christopher Columbus.
Let's talk about it. So the good Democrats in New York City want to erase George Washington and Thomas Jefferson from history. They are claiming that because they owned slaves, they should not have any statues or monuments celebrating them. The New York City Council has already begun the purge by removing Thomas Jefferson from City Hall. Check this out.
For the first time in nearly 2 centuries, a statue of Thomas Jefferson is no longer standing inside New York City Hall. The likeness of the founding father officially removed after the city council voted for the change because Jefferson once owned slaves.
Now, here is a list of famous Americans who owned slaves. The general who won the Civil War and former U.S. President Ulysses S. Grant. Other famous Americans who owned slaves are the father of the Constitution, James Madison, the president on the $20 bill, Andrew Jackson. Even the first Chief Justice of the United States of America, John Jay, owned slaves. And this is the short list. Now, this has always been the fear of conservatives. The woke mob would attempt to rewrite history without proper context, essentially canceling the founding fathers of our country. Yes, these men owned slaves, and so did many others around the world at that time. This was a worldwide phenomenon. Let me say this again. Slavery was a worldwide phenomenon. For instance, from Europe, Asia, Australia, Africa, and even the Americas. Slavery was everywhere. And slave ownership was equally diverse. For instance, most of you would be shocked to know that there are Black Americans who own slaves here in America. Let me introduce you to William Ellison, a former slave who achieved his freedom, considerable success as a slave owner before the American Civil War. He actually owned 57 Black slaves. And there were also white slaves. Matter of fact, the first slaves in America were white slaves. This is from the Ivy League NYU Press. Here is the book called White Cargo. In the 17th and 18th centuries, more than 300,000, let me say that again, 300,000 white people were shipped to America as slaves. These were poor people who were swept up from London streets to labor in tobacco fields, where the life expectancy was no more than 2 years. Brothels were also raided to provide breeders for Virginia. Even migrants to England were duped into signing as indentured servants, unaware that they would become personal property that could be bought, sold, and even gambled away. They even transported convicts and paraded them in the streets like livestock for sale to the highest bidder. All of these people were white. Now, let's just make it very clear, slavery is immoral, but at that time it was legal worldwide. And since we're talking about the ownership of one person to another, women were considered property up until the 1900s. Think about it. Women had zero rights and technically were property of their husbands. That's why generally in marriages, the father gives away his daughter to another man. So does this mean all married men from that time should be removed from history? This is the problem with judging the history of yesterday with the standards of today. Now, the NY City Council thinks that if you can show a historical figure harmed someone in the past, that they should be removed. Here they are saying it.
The purpose of today was to really catalog all the different bills that we have currently that have something to do with reconciliation, equity, repairing the harms that have been done to Black people in the city and Indigenous people in the city.
The city's Cultural Affairs Committee held a hearing Tuesday at City Hall to discuss if monuments like the Christopher Columbus statue at Columbus Circle, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson statues at Washington Square Park, and Peter Stuyvesant figure at Stuyvesant Square Square should be removed from city streets due to their controversial pasts, or stay up with explanation.
Not just what we like to celebrate them for, but what other things did they do to harm certain people?
Now, it's funny because these are the same people who put up statues of George Floyd without any explanation that he was a drug-addicted criminal who was being arrested for trying to steal money from other marginalized people, which were immigrants, by using counterfeit money. Now, he definitely tried to harm certain people, but when it comes to George Floyd, we are supposed to ignore it. But when George Washington, we're supposed to condemn him for it. Now, here is the law that they are trying to get passed.
The bill would require the city to remove works of art on city property that depict a person who owned enslaved people, directly benefited economically from slavery, or participated in systemic crimes against indigenous people and humanity. The bill also suggests that the statues aren't removed, an explanatory plaque next to the work of art would be needed.
Now, we have to understand, these were men of their times, flawed as all human beings are. You can find horrible things about any historical figure. If you look Lincoln for believing that black people were inferior, they shouldn't be on juries, they shouldn't marry white people, he was a man of his time. Let me know what you think about the NYC Council and whether they've gone too far. But honestly, I think they have simply lost their minds. I think there's more they can do than just cancel the founding fathers of the country. Now, you can make an argument that Confederate generals are traitors to the country, for instance, and they literally betrayed the country and tried to destroy it. But think about this. George Washington, he's on the $1 bill. Thomas Jefferson, he's on the $2 bill. Andrew Jackson, he's on the $20 bill. Ulysses S. Grant, he's on the $50 bill, and Benjamin Franklin's on the $100 bill. And one thing they all have in common is they all own slaves. Now, I want to ask you, have we really gotten to a point in our history where we're tearing down statues of George Washington and replacing them with statues of George Floyd? Let me know how you feel in the comments section. My name is Nate the Lawyer, and I'm going to holler at you next time. Peace.